Chapter 19 of Japanese Fairy Tales. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Scott Robbins. Japanese Fairy Tales by Yei Theodora OZAKI. Chapter 19. Momotaro, or The Story of the Son of a Peach. Long, long ago there lived an old man and an old woman. They were peasants and had to work hard to earn their daily rice. The old man used to go and cut grass for the farmers around, and while he was gone the old woman, his wife, did the work of the house and worked in their own little rice field. One day the old man went to the hills as usual to cut grass, and the old woman took some clothes to the river to wash. It was nearly summer, and the country was very beautiful to see in its fresh greenness as the two old people went on their way to work. The grass on the banks of the river looked like emerald velvet, and the pussy willows along the edge of the water were shaking out their soft tassels. The breezes blew and ruffled the smooth surface of the water into wavelets, and passing on touched the cheeks of the old couple, who, for some reason they could not explain, felt very happy that morning. The old woman at last found a nice spot by the river bank and put her basket down. Then she set to work to wash the clothes. She took them one by one out of the basket and washed them in the river and rubbed them on the stones. The water was as clear as crystal, and she could see the tiny fish swimming to and fro, and the pebbles at the bottom. As she was busy washing her clothes, a great peach came bumping down the stream. The old woman looked up from her work and saw this large peach. She was 60 years of age, yet in all her life she had never seen such a big peach as this.
"How delicious that peach must be!" she said to herself. "I must certainly get it and take it home to my old man."
She stretched out her arm to try and get it, but it was quite out of her reach. She looked about for a stick, but there was not one to be seen, and if she went to look for one she would lose the peach. Stopping a moment to think what she would do, she remembered an old charm verse. Now she began to clap her hands to keep time to the rolling of the peach down the stream, and while she clapped she sang this song:
"Distant water is bitter, the near water is sweet. Pass by the distant water and come into the sweet."
Strange to say, as soon as she began to repeat this little song, the peach began to come nearer and nearer the bank where the old woman was standing, till at last it stopped just in front of her, so that she was able to take it up in her hands. The old woman was delighted. She could not go on with her work, so happy and excited was she, so she put all the clothes back in her bamboo basket, and with the basket on her back and the peach in her hand, she hurried homewards. It seemed a very long time to her to wait till her husband returned. The old man at last came back as the sun was setting, with a big bundle of grass on his back, so big that he was almost hidden and she could hardly see him. He seemed very tired, and used the scythe for a walking stick, leaning on it as he walked along. As soon as the old woman saw him, she called out:
"O Fi-san!"
"Old man."
"I have been waiting for you to come home for such a long time today." "What is the matter? Why are you so impatient?" asked the old man, wondering at her unusual eagerness. Has anything happened while I have been away?" "Oh, no," answered the old woman. "Nothing has happened, only I have found a nice present for you." "That is good," said the old man. He then washed his feet in a basin of water and stepped up to the veranda. The old woman now ran into the little room and brought out from the cupboard the big peach. It felt even heavier than before. She held it up to him, saying:
"Just look at this. Did you ever see such a large peach in all your life?"
When the old man looked at the peach, he was greatly astonished, and said:
"This is indeed the largest peach I have ever seen. Wherever did you buy it?"
"I did not buy it,"
answered the old woman.
"I found it in the river where I was washing."
And she told him the whole story.
"I am very glad you have found it. Let us eat it now, for I am hungry," said the Ofiisan.
He brought out the kitchen knife, and placing the peach on a board, was about to cut it, when, wonderful to tell, the peach split in two of itself, and a clear voice said: "Wait a bit, old man!" and out stepped a beautiful little child. The old man and his wife were both so astonished at what they saw that they fell to the ground. The child spoke again: "Don't be afraid. I am no demon or fairy. I will tell you the truth. Heaven has had compassion on you. Every day and every night you have lamented that you had no child. Your cry has been heard, and I am sent to be the son of your old age." On hearing this, the old man and his wife were very happy. They had cried night and day for sorrow at having no child to help them in their lonely old age, and now that their prayer was answered they were so lost with joy that they did not know where to put their hands or their feet. First the old man took the child up in his arms, and then the old woman did the same, and they named him Momotaro, or Son of a Peach, because he had come out of a peach. The years passed quickly by, and the child grew to be 15 years of age. He was taller and far stronger than any other boys of his own age. He had a handsome face and a heart full of courage, and he was very wise for his years. The old couple's pleasure was very great when they looked at him, for he was just what they thought a hero ought to be like. One day Momotaro came to his foster father and said solemnly: "Father, by a strange chance we have become father and son. Your goodness to me has been higher than the mountain grasses which it is your daily work to cut, and deeper than the river where my mother washes the clothes. I do not know how to thank you enough."
"Why," answered the old man, "is it a matter of course that a father should bring up his son? When you are older it will be your turn to take care of us, so after all there will be no profit or loss between us. All will be equal. Indeed, I am rather surprised that you should thank me in this way."
And the old man looked bothered. "I hope you will be patient with me," said Momotaro. "But before I begin to pay back your goodness to me, I have a request to make which I hope you will grant me above everything else."
"I will let you do whatever you wish, for you are quite different to all the other boys."
"Then let me go away at once."
"What do you say? Do you wish to leave your old father and mother and go away from your old home?"
"I will surely come back again if you let me go now."
"Where are you going?"
"You must think it strange that I want to go away," said Momotaro, "because I have not yet told you my reason. Far away from here, to the northeast of Japan, there is an island in the sea. This island is the stronghold of a band of devils. I have often heard how they invade this land, kill and rob the people, and carry off all they can find. They are not only very wicked, but they are disloyal to our Emperor and disobey his laws. They are also cannibals, for they kill and eat some of the poor people who are so unfortunate as to fall into their hands. These devils are very hateful beings. I must go and conquer them, and bring back all the plunder of which they have robbed this land. It is for this reason that I want to go away for a short time." The old man was much surprised at hearing all this from a mere boy of 15. He thought it best to let the boy go. He was strong and fearless, and besides all this, the old man knew he was no common child, for he had been sent to them as a gift from heaven, and he felt quite sure that the devils would be powerless to harm him.
"All you say is very interesting, Momotaro," said the old man. "I will not hinder you in your determination. You may go if you wish. Go to the island as soon as ever you like and destroy the demons and bring peace to the land."
"Thank you for all your kindness," said Momotaro, who began to get ready to go that very day. He was full of courage and did not know what fear was. The old man and woman at once set to work to pound rice in the kitchen mortar to make cakes for Momotaro to take with him on his journey. At last the cakes were made, and Momotaro was ready to start on his long journey. Parting is always sad. So it was now. The eyes of the two old people were filled with tears, and their voices trembled as they said:
"Go with all care and speed. We expect you back victorious."
Momotaro was very sorry to leave his old parents, though he knew he was coming back as soon as he could, for he thought of how lonely they would be while he was away, but he said good-bye quite bravely. "I am going now. Take good care of yourselves while I am away. Good-bye." And he stepped quickly out of the house. In silence the eyes of Momotaro and his parents met in farewell. Momotaro now hurried on his way till it was midday. He began to feel hungry, so he opened his bag and took out one of the rice cakes and sat down under a tree by the side of the road to eat it. While he was thus having his lunch, a dog almost as large as a colt came running out from the high grass. He made straight for Momotaro, and, showing his teeth, said in a fierce way:
"You are a rude man to pass my field without asking permission first. If you leave me all the cakes you have in your bag, you may go. Otherwise I will bite you till I kill you."
Momotaro only laughed scornfully. "What is that you are saying? Do you know who I am? I am Momotaro, and I am on my way to subdue the devils in their island stronghold in the northeast of Japan. If you try to stop me on my way there, I will cut you in two from the head downwards." The dog's manner at once changed. His tail dropped between his legs, and coming near he bowed so low that his forehead touched the ground.
"What do I hear? The name of Momotaro? Are you indeed Momotaro? I have often heard of your great strength. Not knowing who you were, I have behaved in a very stupid way. Will you please pardon my rudeness? Are you indeed on your way to invade the island of devils? If you will take such a rude fellow with you as one of your followers, I shall be very grateful to you."
"I think I can take you with me if you wish to go," said Momotaro.
"Thank you," said the dog. "By the way, I am very, very hungry. Will you give me one of the cakes you are carrying?"
"This is the best kind of cake there is in Japan," said Momotaro. "I cannot spare you a whole one. I will give you half of one."
"Thank you very much," said the dog, taking the piece thrown to him.
Then Momotaro got up and the dog followed. For a long time they walked over the hills and through the valleys. As they were going along an animal came down from a tree a little ahead of them. The creature soon came up to Momotaro and said:
"Good morning, Momotaro. You are welcome in this part of the country. Will you allow me to go with you?"
The dog answered jealously:
"Momotaro already has a dog to accompany him. Of what use is a monkey like you in battle? We are on our way to fight the devils. Get away!"
The dog and the monkey began to quarrel and bite, for these two animals always hate each other. "Now don't quarrel," said Momotaro, putting himself between them. "Wait a moment, dog."
"It is not at all dignified for you to have such a creature as that following you," said the dog.
"What do you know about it?" asked Momotaro, pushing aside the dog. He spoke to the monkey. Who are you?" "I am a monkey living in these hills," replied the monkey. "I heard of your expedition to the Island of Devils, and I have come to go with you. Nothing will please me more than to follow you." "Do you really wish to go to the Island of Devils and fight with me?" "Yes, sir," replied the monkey. "I admire your courage," said Momotaro. "Here is a piece of one of my fine rice cakes. Come along." So the monkey joined Momotaro. The dog and the monkey did not get on well together. They were always snapping at each other as they went along, and always wanting to have a fight. This made Momotaro very cross, and at last he sent the dog on ahead with a flag and put the monkey behind with a sword, and he placed himself between them with a war fan, which is made of iron. By and by they came to a large field. Here a bird flew down and alighted on the ground just in front of the little party. It was the most beautiful bird Momotaro had ever seen. On its body were 5 different robes of feathers, and its head was covered with a scarlet cap. The dog at once ran at the bird and tried to seize and kill it, but the bird struck out its spurs and flew at the dog's tail, and the fight went hard with both. Momotaro, as he looked on, could not help admiring the bird. It showed so much spirit in the fight. It would certainly make a good fighter. Momotaro went up to the 2 combatants, and holding the dog back, said to the bird: "You rascal, you are hindering my journey. Surrender at once, and I will take you with me. If I don't, I will set this dog to bite your head off." Then the bird surrendered at once, and begged to be taken into Momotaro's company.
"I do not know what excuse to offer for quarreling with the dog, your servant, but I did not see you. I am a miserable bird called a pheasant. It is very generous of you to pardon my rudeness and to take me with you. Please allow me to follow you behind the dog and the monkey."
"I congratulate you on surrendering so soon," said Momotaro, smiling. "Come and join us in our raid on the devils."
"Are you going to take this bird with you also?" asked the dog, interrupting.
"Why do you ask such an unnecessary question? Didn't you hear what I said? I take the bird with me because I wish to."
"Humph!"
said the dog. Then Momotaro stood and gave this order: "Now all of you must listen to me. The first thing necessary in an army is harmony. It is a wise saying which says that advantage on earth is better than advantage in heaven. Union amongst ourselves is better than any earthly gain. When we are not at peace amongst ourselves, it is no easy thing to subdue an enemy. From now you 3, the dog, the monkey, and the pheasant, must be friends with one mind. The one who first begins a quarrel will be discharged on the spot." All 3 promised not to quarrel. The pheasant was now made a member of Momotaro's suite, and received half a cake. Momotaro's influence was so great that the 3 became good friends, and hurried onwards with him as their leader. Hurrying on day after day, they at last came out upon the shore of the northeastern sea. There was nothing to be seen as far as the horizon, not a sign of any island. All that broke the stillness was the rolling of the waves upon the shore. Now the dog and the monkey and the pheasant had come very bravely all the way through the long valleys and over the hills, but they had never seen the sea before, and for the first time since they set out they were bewildered and gazed at each other in silence. How were they to cross the water to get to the Island of Devils? Momotaro soon saw that they were daunted by the sight of the sea, and to try them he spoke loudly and roughly. "Why do you hesitate? Are you afraid of the sea? Oh, what cowards you are! It is impossible to take such weak creatures as you with me to fight the demons. It will be far better for me to go alone. I discharge you all at once." The 3 animals were taken aback at this sharp reproof, and clung to Momotaro's sleeve, begging him not to send them away.
"Please, Momotaro," said the dog.
"We have come this far," said the monkey.
"It is inhuman to leave us here,"
said the pheasant.
"We are not at all afraid of the sea," said the monkey again. "Please do take us with you," said the pheasant.
"Do, please,"
said the dog. They had now gained a little courage, so Momotaro said: "Well, then, I will take you with me, but be careful." Momotaro now got a small ship, and they all got on board. The wind and weather were fair, and the ship went like an arrow over the sea. It was the first time they had ever been on the water, and so at first the dog, the monkey, and the pheasant were frightened at the waves and the rolling of the vessel, but by degrees they grew accustomed to the water and were quite happy again. Every day they paced the deck of their little ship, eagerly looking out for the demon's island. When they grew tired of this, they told each other stories of all their exploits of which they were proud, and then played games together, and Momotaro found much to amuse himself in listening to the three animals, watching their antics, and in this way he forgot that the way was long, and that he was tired of the voyage and of doing nothing. He longed to be at work killing the monsters who had done so much harm in his country. As the wind blew in their favor, and they met no storms, the ship made a quick voyage, and one day when the sun was shining brightly, a sight of land rewarded the four watchers at the bow. Momotaro knew at once that what they saw was the devil's stronghold. On top of the precipitous shore, looking out to sea, was a large castle. Now that his enterprise was close at hand, he was deep in thought, with his head leaning on his hands, wondering how he should begin the attack. His three followers watched him, waiting for orders. At last he called to the pheasant. "It is a great advantage for us to have you with us," said Momotaro to the bird, "for you have good wings. Fly at once to the castle and engage the demons to fight. We will follow you." The pheasant at once obeyed. He flew off from the ship, beating the air gladly with his wings. The bird soon reached the island, and took up his position on the roof in the middle of the castle, calling out loudly: "All you devils, listen to me! The great Japanese General Momotaro has come to fight you and to take your stronghold from you. If you wish to save your lives, surrender at once, and in token of your submission you must break off the horns that grow on your forehead. If you do not surrender at once, but make up your mind to fight, we, the pheasant, the dog, and the monkey, will kill you all by biting and tearing you to death." The horned demons, looking up and seeing only a pheasant, laughed and said:
"A wild pheasant indeed! It is ridiculous to hear such words from a mean thing like you. Wait till you get a blow from one of our iron bars."
Very angry indeed were the devils. They shook their horns and their shocks of red hair fiercely, and rushed to put on tiger skin trousers, and to make themselves look more terrible. They then brought out great iron bars, and ran to where the pheasant perched over their heads, and tried to knock him down. The pheasant flew to one side to escape the blow, and then attacked the head of first one and then another demon. He flew round and round them, beating the air with his wings so fiercely and ceaselessly that the devils began to wonder whether they had to fight one or many more birds. In the meantime Momotaro had brought his ship to land. As they had approached, he saw that the shore was like a precipice, and that the large castle was surrounded by high walls and large iron gates, and was strongly fortified. Momotaro landed, and with the hope of finding some way of entrance, walked up the path towards the top, followed by the monkey and the dog. They soon came upon two beautiful damsels washing clothes in a stream. Momotaro saw that the clothes were blood-stained, and that, as the two maidens washed, the tears were falling fast down their cheeks. He stopped and spoke to them. "Who are you, and why do you weep?" "We are captives of the Demon King. We were carried away from our homes to this island, and though we are the daughters of daimyos (lords), we are obliged to be his servants. And one day he will kill us." and the maidens held up the blood-stained clothes.
"And eat us, and there is no one to help us!"
And their tears burst out afresh at this horrible thought. "I will rescue you," said Momotaro. "Do not weep any more, only show me how I may get into the castle." Then the two ladies led the way and showed Momotaro a little back door in the lowest part of the castle wall, so small that Momotaro could hardly crawl in. The pheasant, who was all this time fighting hard, saw Momotaro and his little band rush in at the back. Momotaro's onslaught was so furious that the devils could not stand against him. At first their foe had been a single bird, the pheasant, but now that Momotaro and the dog and the monkey had arrived they were bewildered, for the four enemies fought like 100, so strong were they. Some of the devils fell off the parapet of the castle and were dashed to pieces on the rocks beneath. Others fell into the sea and were drowned, and many were beaten to death by the three animals. The chief of the devils at last was the only one left. He made up his mind to surrender, for he knew that his enemy was stronger than mortal man. He came up humbly to Momotaro and threw down his iron bar, and kneeling down at the victor's feet, he broke off the horns on his head in token of submission, for they were the sign of his strength and power.
"I am afraid of you," he said meekly. "I cannot stand against you. I will give you all the treasure hidden in this castle if you will spare my life."
Momotaro laughed. "It is not like you, big devil, to beg for mercy, is it? I cannot spare your wicked life, however much you beg, for you have killed and tortured many people and robbed our country for many years." Then Momotaro tied the devil chief up and gave him into the monkey's charge. Having done this, he went into all the rooms of the castle and set the prisoners free, and gathered together all the treasure he found. The dog and the pheasant carried home the plunder, and thus Momotaro received triumphantly to his home, taking with him the devil chief as a captive. The two poor damsels, daughters of daimyos, and others whom the wicked demon had carried off to be his slaves, were taken safely to their own homes and delivered to their parents. The whole country made a hero of Momotaro on his triumphant return, and rejoiced that the country was now freed from the robber devils, who had been a terror of the land for a long time. The old couple's joy was greater than ever, and the treasure Momotaro had brought with him enabled them to live in peace and plenty to the end of their days. End of chapter 19. Momotaro, or The Story of the Son of a Peach. Recording by Scott Robbins.
Chapter 20 of Japanese Fairy Tales. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Japanese Fairy Tales by Yei Theodora OZAKI. Chapter 20. The Ogre of Rashomon. Long, long ago in Kyoto, the people of the city were terrified by accounts of a dreadful ogre, who, it was said, haunted the gate of Rashomon at twilight and seized whoever passed by. The missing victims were never seen again, so it was whispered that the ogre was a horrible cannibal, who not only killed the unhappy victims, but ate them also. Now everybody in the town and neighborhood was in great fear, and no one durst venture out after sunset near the gate of Rashomon. Now at this time there lived in Kyoto a general named Raiko, who had made himself famous for his brave deeds. Some time before this he made the country ring with his name, for he had attacked Oeyama, where a band of ogres lived with their chief, who instead of wine drank the blood of human beings. He had routed them all and cut off the head of the chief monster. This brave warrior was always followed by a band of faithful knights. In this band there were 5 knights of great valor. One evening, as the 5 knights sat at a feast quaffing sake in their rice bowls and eating all kinds of fish, raw and stewed and broiled, and toasting each other's healths and exploits, the first knight, Hojo, said to the others: "Have you all heard the rumor that every evening after sunset there comes an ogre to the gate of Rashomon, and that he seizes all who pass by?" The second knight, Watanabe, answered him, saying: "Do not talk such nonsense. All the ogres were killed by our chief Raiko at Oeyama. It cannot be true, because even if any ogres did escape from that great killing, they would not dare to show themselves in this city, for they know that our brave master would at once attack them if he knew that any of them were still alive." "Then do you disbelieve what I say, and think that I am telling you a falsehood?" "No, I do not think that you are telling a lie," said Watanabe, "but you have heard some old woman's story which is not worth believing." "Then the best plan is to prove what I say by going there yourself and finding out yourself whether it is true or not," said Hojo. Watanabe, the second knight, could not bear the thought that his companion should believe he was afraid, so he answered quickly: "Of course, I will go at once and find out for myself." So Watanabe at once got ready to go. He buckled on his long sword, and put on a coat of armor, and tied on his large helmet. When he was ready to start, he said to the others: "Give me something so that I can prove I have been there." Then one of the men got a roll of writing paper and his box of Indian ink and brushes, and the 4 comrades wrote their names on a piece of paper. "I will take this," said Watanabe, "and put it on the gate of Rashomon, so tomorrow morning you will all go and look at it. I may be able to catch an ogre or 2 by then." And he mounted his horse and rode off gallantly. It was a very dark night, and there was neither moon nor star to light Watanabe on his way. To make the darkness worse, a storm came on. The rain fell heavily and the wind howled like wolves in the mountains. Any ordinary man would have trembled at the thought of going out of doors, but Watanabe was a brave warrior and dauntless, and his honor and word were at stake. So he sped on into the night, while his companions listened to the sound of his horse's hoofs dying away in the distance, then shut the sliding shutters close, and gathered round the charcoal fire and wondered what would happen, and whether their comrade would encounter one of those horrible Oni. At last Watanabe reached the gate of Rashomon, but peer as he might through the darkness, he could see no sign of an ogre. "It is just as I thought," said Watanabe to himself. "There are certainly no ogres here. It is only an old woman's story. I will stick this paper on the gate so that the others can see I have been here when they come tomorrow, and then I will take my way home and laugh at them all." He fastened the piece of paper, signed by all his 4 companions, on the gate, and then turned his horse's head towards home. As he did so he became aware that some one was behind him, and at the same time a voice called out to him to wait. Then his helmet was seized from the back. "Who are you?" said Watanabe fearlessly. He then put out his hand and groped around to find out who or what it was that held him by the helmet. As he did so he touched something that felt like an arm. It was covered with hair, and as big round as the trunk of a tree. Watanabe knew at once that this was the arm of an ogre, so he drew his sword and cut at it fiercely. There was a loud yell of pain, and then the ogre dashed in front of the warrior. Watanabe's eyes grew large with wonder, for he saw that the ogre was taller than the great gate. His eyes were flashing like mirrors in the sunlight, and his huge mouth was wide open, and as the monster breathed, flames of fire shot out of his mouth. The ogre thought to terrify his foe, but Watanabe never flinched. He attacked the ogre with all his strength, and thus they fought face to face for a long time. At last the ogre, finding that he could neither frighten nor beat Watanabe, and that he might himself be beaten, took to flight. But Watanabe, determined not to let the monster escape, put spurs to his horse and gave chase. But though the knight rode very fast, the ogre ran faster, and to his disappointment he found himself unable to overtake the monster, who was gradually lost to sight. Watanabe returned to the gate where the fierce fight had taken place, and got down from his horse. As he did so he stumbled upon something lying on the ground. Stooping to pick it up, he found that it was one of the ogre's huge arms, which he must have slashed off in the fight. His joy was great at having secured such a prize, for this was the best of all proofs of his adventure with the ogre. So he took it up carefully and carried it home as a trophy of his victory. When he got back he showed the arm to his comrades, who one and all called him the hero of their band and gave him a great feast. His wonderful deed was soon noised abroad in Kyoto, and people from far and near came to see the ogre's arm. Watanabe now began to grow uneasy as to how he should keep the arm in safety, for he knew that the ogre to whom it belonged was still alive. He felt sure that one day or other, as soon as the ogre got over his scare, he would come to try to get his arm back again. Watanabe therefore had a box made of the strongest wood and banded with iron. In this he placed the arm, and then he sealed down the heavy lid, refusing to open it for anyone. He kept the box in his own room, and took charge of it himself, never allowing it out of his sight. Now one night he heard someone knocking at the porch, asking for admittance. When the servant went to the door to see who it was, there was only an old woman, very respectable in appearance. On being asked who she was, and what was her business, the old woman replied with a smile that she had been nurse to the master of the house when he was a little baby. If the lord of the house were at home, she begged to be allowed to see him. The servant left the old woman at the door and went to tell his master that his old nurse had come to see him. Watanabe thought it strange that she should come at that time of night, but at the thought of his old nurse, who had been like a foster mother to him, and whom he had not seen for a long time, a very tender feeling sprang up for her in his heart. He ordered the servant to show her in. The old woman was ushered into the room, and after the customary bows and greetings were over, she said:
"Master, the report of your brave fight with the ogre at the gate of Rashomon is so widely known that even your poor old nurse has heard of it. Is it really true what everyone says, that you cut off one of the ogre's arms? If you did, your deed is highly to be praised."
"I was very disappointed," said Watanabe, "that I was not able to take the monster captive, which was what I wished to do, instead of only cutting off an arm."
"I am very proud to think," answered the old woman, "that my master was so brave as to dare to cut off an ogre's arm. There is nothing that can be compared to your courage. Before I die, it is the great wish of my life to see this arm," she added pleadingly.
"No," said Watanabe, "I am sorry, but I cannot grant your request."
"But why?"
asked the old woman. "Because," replied Watanabe, "ogres are very revengeful creatures, and if I open the box, there is no telling but that the ogre may suddenly appear and carry off his arm. I have had a box made on purpose with a very strong lid, and in this box I keep the ogre's arm secure, and I never show it to anyone, whatever happens."
"Your precaution is very reasonable," said the old woman, "but I am your old nurse, so surely you will not refuse to show me the arm. I have only just heard of your brave act, and not being able to wait till the morning, I came at once to ask you to show it to me."
Watanabe was very troubled at the old woman's pleading, but he still persisted in refusing. Then the old woman said:
"Do you suspect me of being a spy sent by the ogre?"
"No, of course I do not suspect you of being the ogre's spy, for you are my old nurse," answered Watanabe.
"Then you cannot surely refuse to show me the arm any longer," entreated the old woman, for it is the great wish of my heart to see for once in my life the arm of an ogre."
Watanabe could not hold out in his refusal any longer, so he gave in at last, saying: "Then I will show you the ogre's arm, since you so earnestly wish to see it. Come, follow me." And he led the way to his own room, the old woman following. When they were both in the room, Watanabe shut the door carefully, and then going towards a big box which stood in a corner of the room, he took off the heavy lid. He then called to the old woman to come near and look in, for he never took the arm out of the box.
"What is it like? Let me have a good look at it," said the old nurse with a joyful face.
She came nearer and nearer, as if she were afraid, till she stood right against the box. Suddenly she plunged her hand into the box and seized the arm, crying with a fearful voice which made the room shake:
"Oh, joy! I have got my arm back again!"
And from an old woman she was suddenly transformed into the towering figure of the frightful ogre. Watanabe sprang back and was unable to move for a moment, so great was his astonishment. But recognizing the ogre who had attacked him at the gate of Rashomon, he determined with his usual courage to put an end to him this time. He seized his sword, drew it out of its sheath in a flash, and tried to cut the ogre down. So quick was Watanabe that the creature had a narrow escape, but the ogre sprang up to the ceiling, and bursting through the roof, disappeared in the mist and clouds. In this way the ogre escaped with his arm. The knight gnashed his teeth with disappointment, but that was all he could do. He waited in patience for another opportunity to dispatch the ogre, but the latter was afraid of Watanabe's great strength and daring, and never troubled Kyoto again. So once the people of the city were able to go out without fear even at night time, and the brave deeds of Watanabe have never been forgotten. End of chapter 20. The Ogre of Rashomon. Recording by Scott Robbins.
Chapter 21 of Japanese Fairy Tales. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Scott Robbins. Japanese Fairy Tales by Yei Theodora OZAKI. Chapter 21. How an Old Man Lost His Wen. Many, many years ago there lived a good old man who had a wen like a tennis ball growing out of his right cheek. This lump was a great disfigurement to the old man, and so annoyed him that for many years he spent all his time and money in trying to get rid of it. He tried everything he could think of. He consulted many doctors far and near, and took all kinds of medicines both internally and externally. But it was all of no use. The lump only grew bigger and bigger, till it was nearly as big as his face, and in despair he gave up all hopes of ever losing it, and resigned himself to the thought of having to carry the lump on his face all his life. One day the firewood gave out in his kitchen, so, as his wife wanted some at once, the old man took his axe and set out for the woods up among the hills not very far from his home. It was a fine day in the early autumn, and the old man enjoyed the fresh air and was in no hurry to get home. So the whole afternoon passed quickly while he was chopping wood, and he had collected a goodly pile to take back to his wife. When the day began to draw to a close, he turned his face homewards. The old man had not gone far on his way down the mountain pass when the sky clouded and rain began to fall heavily. He looked about for some shelter, but there was not even a charcoal burner's hut near. At last he espied a large hole in the hollow trunk of a tree. The hole was near the ground, so he crept in easily, and sat down in hopes that he had only been overtaken by a mountain shower, and that the weather would soon clear. But much to the old man's disappointment, instead of clearing, the rain fell more and more heavily, and finally a heavy thunderstorm broke over the mountain. The thunder roared so terrifically, and the heavens seemed to be so ablaze with lightning, that the old man could hardly believe himself to be alive. He thought that he must die of fright. At last, however, the sky cleared, and the whole country was aglow in the rays of the setting sun. The old man's spirits revived when he looked out at the beautiful twilight, and he was about to step from his strange hiding place in the hollow tree, when the sound of what seemed like the approaching steps of several people caught his ear. He at once thought that his friends had come to look for him, and he was delighted at the idea of having some jolly companions with whom to walk home. But on looking out from the tree, what was his amazement to see not his friends, but hundreds of demons coming towards the spot. The more he looked, the greater was his astonishment. Some of the demons were as large as giants, others had great big eyes, out of all proportion to the rest of their bodies. Others again had absurdly long noses, and some had such big mouths that they seemed to open from ear to ear. All had horns growing on their foreheads. The old man was so surprised at what he saw that he lost his balance and fell out of the hollow tree. Fortunately for him, the demons did not see him, as the tree was in the background, so he picked himself up and crept back into the tree. While he was sitting there and wondering impatiently when he would be able to get home, he heard the sounds of gay music, and then some of the demons began to sing.
"What are these creatures doing?" said the old man to himself. "I will look out. It sounds very amusing."
On peeping out, the old man saw that the demon chief himself was actually sitting with his back against the tree in which he had taken refuge, and all the other demons were sitting round, some drinking and some dancing. Food and wine was spread before them on the ground, and the demons were evidently having a great entertainment and enjoying themselves immensely. It made the old man laugh to see their strange antics.
"How amusing this is!"
laughed the old man to himself.
"I am now quite old, but I have never seen anything so strange in all my life."
He was so interested and excited in watching all that the demons were doing that he forgot himself and stepped out of the tree and stood looking on. The demon chief was just taking a big cup of sake and watching one of the demons dancing. In a little while he said with a bored air:
"Your dance is rather monotonous. I am tired of watching it. Isn't there any one amongst you all who can dance better than this fellow?"
Now the old man had been fond of dancing all his life, and was quite an expert in the art, and he knew that he could do much better than the demon.
"Shall I go and dance before these demons and let them see what a human being can do? It may be dangerous, for if I don't please them they may kill me," said the old fellow to himself. His fears, however, were soon overcome by his love of dancing. In a few minutes he could restrain himself no longer, and came out before the whole party of demons and began to dance at once. The old man, realizing that his life probably depended on whether he pleased these strange creatures or not, exerted his skill and wit to the utmost. The demons were at first very surprised to see a man so fearlessly taking part in their entertainment, and then their surprise soon gave place to admiration.
"How strange!" exclaimed the horned chief. "I never saw such a skillful dancer before. He dances admirably."
When the old man had finished his dance, the big demon said:
"Thank you very much for your amusing dance. Now give us the pleasure of drinking a cup of wine with us."
And with these words he handed him his largest wine cup. The old man thanked him very humbly.
"I did not expect such kindness from your lordship. I fear I have only disturbed your pleasant party by my unskilful dancing."
"No, no," answered the big demon. "You must come often and dance for us. Your skill has given us much pleasure."
The old man thanked him again and promised to do so.
"Then will you come again tomorrow, old man?" asked the demon.
"Certainly I will," answered the old man.
"Then you must leave some pledge of your word with us," said the demon.
"Whatever you like," said the old man.
"Now what is the best thing he can leave with us as a pledge?" asked the demon, looking round.
Then said one of the demon's attendants kneeling behind the chief,
"The token he leaves with us must be the most important thing to him in his possession. I see the old man has a wen on his right cheek. Now mortal men consider such a wen very fortunate. Let my lord take the lump from the old man's right cheek, and he will surely come tomorrow, if only to get that back."
"You are very clever,"
said the demon chief, giving his horns an approving nod. Then he stretched out a hairy arm and claw-like hand and took the great lump from the old man's right cheek. Strange to say, it came off as easily as a ripe plum from the tree at the demon's touch, and then the merry troop of demons suddenly vanished. The old man was lost in bewilderment by all that had happened. He hardly knew for some time where he was. When he came to understand what had happened to him, he was delighted to find that the lump on his face, which had for so many years disfigured him, had really been taken away without any pain to himself. He put up his hand to feel if any scar remained, but found that his right cheek was as smooth as his left. The sun had long set, and the young moon had risen like a silver crescent in the sky. The old man suddenly realized how late it was, and began to hurry home. He patted his right cheek all the time, as if to make sure of his good fortune in having lost the wen. He was so happy that he found it impossible to walk quietly. He ran and danced the whole way home. He found his wife very anxious, wondering what had happened to make him so late. He soon told her all that had passed since he left home that afternoon. She was quite as happy as her husband when he showed her that the ugly lump had disappeared from his face, for in her youth she had prided herself on his good looks, and it had been a daily grief to her to see the horrid growth. Now next door to this good old couple there lived a wicked and disagreeable old man. He too had for many years been troubled with the growth of a wen on his left cheek, and he too had tried all manner of things to get rid of it, but in vain. He heard at once, through the servant, of his neighbor's good luck in losing the lump on his face, so he called that very evening and asked his friend to tell him everything that concerned the loss of it. The good old man told his disagreeable neighbor all that had happened to him. He described the place where he would find the hollow tree in which to hide, and advised him to be on the spot in the late afternoon, towards the time of sunset. The old neighbor started out the very next afternoon, and after hunting about for some time, came to the hollow tree just as his friend had described. Here he hid himself and waited for the twilight. Just as he had been told, the band of demons came at that hour and held a feast with dance and song. When this had gone on for some time, the chief of the demons looked around and said:
"It is now time for the old man to come as he promised us. Why doesn't he come?"
When the second old man heard these words he ran out of his hiding place in the tree, and kneeling down before the Oni, said:
"I have been waiting for a long time for you to speak."
"Ah, you are the old man of yesterday," said the demon chief. "Thank you for coming. You must dance for us soon."
The old man now stood up and opened his fan and began to dance. But he had never learned to dance, and knew nothing about the necessary gestures and different positions. He thought that anything would please the demons, so he just hopped about, waving his arms and stamping his feet, imitating as well as he could any dancing he had ever seen. The Oni were very dissatisfied at this exhibition, and said amongst themselves, "How badly he dances today!" Then to the old man the demon chief said, "Your performance today is quite different from the dance of yesterday. We don't wish to see any more of such dancing. We will give you back the pledge you left with us. You must go away at once." With these words he took out from a fold of his dress the lump which he had taken from the face of the old man who had danced so well the day before, and threw it at the right cheek of the old man who stood before him. The lump immediately attached itself to his cheek as firmly as if it had grown there always, and all attempts to pull it off were useless. The wicked old man, instead of losing the lump on his left cheek as he had hoped, found to his dismay that he had but added another to his right cheek in his attempt to get rid of the first. He put up first one hand and then the other to each side of his face to make sure if he were not dreaming a horrible nightmare. No, sure enough, there was now a great wen on the right side of his face as on the left. The demons had all disappeared, and there was nothing for him to do but to return home. He was a pitiful sight, for his face, with the two large lumps, one on each side, looked just like a Japanese gourd. End of chapter 21. How an Old Man Lost His Wen. Recording by Scott Robbins.
Chapter 22 of Japanese Fairy Tales. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Japanese Fairy Tales by Yei Theodora OZAKI. Chapter 22. The Stones of Five Colors and the Empress Jokwa. An Old Chinese Story. Long, long ago there lived a great Chinese empress who succeeded her brother, the Emperor Fuki. It was the age of giants, and the Empress Jokwa, for that was her name, was 25 feet high, nearly as tall as her brother. She was a wonderful woman and an able ruler. There is an interesting story of how she mended a part of the broken heavens and one of the terrestrial pillars which upheld the sky, both of which were damaged during a rebellion raised by one of King Fuki's subjects. The rebel's name was Kokai. He was 26 feet high. His body was entirely covered with hair, and his face was as black as iron. He was a wizard, and a very terrible character indeed. When the Emperor Fuki died, Kokai was bitten with the ambition to be Emperor of China, but his plan failed, and Jokwa, the dead Emperor's sister, mounted the throne. Kokai was so angry at being thwarted in his desire that he raised a revolt. His first act was to employ the Water Devil, who caused a great flood to rush over the country. This swamped the poor people out of their homes, and when the Empress Jokwa saw the plight of her subjects, and knew it was Kokai's fault, she declared war against him. Now Jokwa, the Empress, had two young warriors called Hako and Aiko, and the former she made general of the front forces. Hako was delighted that the Empress's choice should fall on him, and he prepared himself for battle. He took up the longest lance he could find, and mounted a red horse, and was just about to set out when he heard someone galloping hard behind him and shouting, "Hako, stop! The general of the front forces must be I!" He looked back and saw Aiko, his comrade, riding on a white horse, in the act of unsheathing a large sword to draw upon him. Hako's anger was kindled, and as he turned to face his rival, he cried: "Insolent wretch! I have been appointed by the Empress to lead the front forces to battle. Do you dare to stop me?" "Yes," answered Aiko. I ought to lead the army. It is you who should follow me." At this bold reply Hako's anger burst from a spark into a flame. "Dare you answer me thus? Take that!" And he lunged at him with his lance. But Aiko moved quickly aside, and at the same time, raising his sword, he wounded the head of the general's horse. Obliged to dismount, Hako was about to rush at his antagonist, when Aiko, as quick as lightning, tore from his breast the badge of commandership and galloped away. The action was so quick that Hako stood dazed, not knowing what to do. The Empress had been a spectator of the scene, and she could not but admire the quickness of the ambitious Aiko, and in order to pacify the rivals, she determined to appoint them both to the generalship of the front army. So Hako was made the commander of the left wing of the front army, and Aiko of the right. 100,000 soldiers followed them and marched to put down the rebel Kokai. Within a short time the two generals reached the castle where Kokai had fortified himself. When aware of their approach, the wizard said:
"I will blow these two poor children away with one breath."
He little thought how hard he would find the fight. With these words Kokai seized an iron rod and mounted a black horse, and rushed forth like an angry tiger to meet his two foes. As the two young warriors saw him tearing down upon them, they said to each other: "We must not let him escape alive!" And they attacked him from the right and from the left with sword and with lance. But the all-powerful Kokai was not to be easily beaten. He whirled his iron rod round like a great water wheel, and for a long time they fought thus, neither side gaining nor losing. At last, to avoid the wizard's iron rod, Hako turned his horse too quickly, the animal's hoofs struck against a large stone, and in a fright the horse reared as straight on end as a screen, throwing his master to the ground. Thereupon Kokai drew his three-edged sword and was about to kill the prostrate Hako, but before the wizard could work his wicked will, the brave Aiko had wheeled his horse in front of Kokai, and dared him to try his strength with him, and not to kill a fallen man. But Kokai was tired, and he did not feel inclined to face this fresh and dauntless young soldier, so suddenly wheeling his horse round, he fled from the fray. Hako, who had been only slightly stunned, had by this time got upon his feet, and he and his comrade rushed after the retreating enemy, the one on foot and the other on horseback. Kokai, seeing that he was pursued, turned upon his nearest assailant, who was, of course, the mounted Aiko, and drawing forth an arrow from the quiver at his back, fitted it to his bow and drew upon Aiko. As quick as lightning the wary Aiko avoided the shaft, which only touched his helmet strings and glanced off, fell harmless against Hako's coat of armor. The wizard saw that both his enemies remained unscathed. He also knew there was no time to pull a second arrow before they would be upon him, so to save himself he resorted to magic. He stretched forth his wand and immediately a great flood arose, and Jokwa's army and her brave young generals were swept away like a falling of autumn leaves on a stream. Hako and Aiko found themselves struggling neck deep in water, and looking round they saw the ferocious Kokai making towards them through the water with his iron rod on high. They thought every moment that they would be cut down, but they bravely struck out to swim as far as they could from Kokai's reach. All of a sudden they found themselves in front of what seemed to be an island rising straight out of the water. They looked up, and there stood an old man with hair as white as snow, smiling at them. They cried to him to help them. The old man nodded his head and came down to the edge of the water. As soon as his feet touched the flood it divided, and a good road appeared, to the amazement of the drowning men, who now found themselves safe. Kokai had by this time reached the island, which had risen as if by a miracle out of the water, and seeing his enemies thus saved, he was furious. He rushed through the water upon the old man, and it seemed as if he would surely be killed, but the old man appeared not in the least dismayed, and calmly awaited the wizard's onslaught. As Kokai drew near, the old man laughed aloud merrily, and turning into a large and beautiful white crane, flapped his wings and flew upwards into the heavens. When Hako and Eiko saw this, they knew that their deliverer was no mere human being, was perhaps a god in disguise, and they hoped later on to find out who the venerable old man was. In the meantime they had retreated, and it being now the close of day, for the sun was setting, both Kokai and the young warriors gave up the idea of fighting more that day. That night Hako and Eiko decided that it was useless to fight against the wizard Kokai, for he had supernatural powers, while they were only human. So they presented themselves before the Empress Jokwa. After a long consultation the Empress decided to ask the Fire King, Shikuyu, to help her against the rebel wizard and to lead her army against him. Now Shikuyu, the Fire King, lived at the South Pole. It was the only safe place for him to be in, for he burnt up everything around him anywhere else, but it was impossible to burn up ice and snow. To look at he was a giant and stood 30 feet high. His face was just like marble, and his hair and beard long and as white as snow. His strength was stupendous, and he was master of all fire, just as Kokai was of water. "Surely," thought the Empress, "Shikuyu can conquer Kokai." So she sent Eiko to the South Pole to beg Shikuyu to take the war against Kokai into his own hands, and conquer him once and for all. The Fire King, on hearing the Empress's request, smiled and said: "That is an easy matter, to be sure. It was none other than I who came to your rescue when you and your companion were drowning in the flood raised by Kokai." Eiko was surprised at learning this. He thanked the Fire King for coming to the rescue in their dire need, and then besought him to return with him and lead the war and defeat the wicked Kokai. Shikuyu did as he was asked, and returned with Eiko to the Empress. She welcomed the Fire King cordially, and at once told him why she had sent for him, to ask him to be the generalissimo of her army. His reply was very reassuring. "Do not have any anxiety. I will certainly kill Kokai." Shikuyu then placed himself at the head of 30,000 soldiers, and with Hako and Eiko showing him the way, marched to the enemy's castle. The Fire King knew the secret of Kokai's power, and he now told all the soldiers to gather a certain kind of shrub. This they burned in large quantities, and each soldier was then ordered to fill a bag full of the ashes thus obtained. Kokai, on the other hand, in his own conceit, thought that Shikuyu was of inferior power to himself, and he murmured angrily: "Even though you are the Fire King, I can soon extinguish you." Then he repeated an incantation, and the water floods rose and welled as high as mountains. Shikuyu, not in the least frightened, ordered his soldiers to scatter the ashes which he had caused them to make. Every man did as he was bid, and such was the power of the plant that they had burned, that as soon as the ashes mingled with the water a stiff mud was formed, and they were all safe from drowning. Now Kokai the wizard was dismayed when he saw that the Fire King was superior in wisdom to himself, and his anger was so great that he rushed headlong towards the enemy. Eiko rode to meet him, and the two fought together for some time. They were well matched in hand-to-hand combat. Hako, who was carefully watching the fray, saw that Eiko began to tire, and fearing that his companion would be killed, he took his place. But Kokai had tired as well, and feeling himself unable to hold out against Hako, he said artfully: "You are too magnanimous, thus to fight for your friend and run the risk of being killed. I will not hurt such a good man." And he pretended to retreat, turning away the head of his horse. His intention was to throw Hako off his guard, and then to wheel round and take him by surprise. But Shikuyu understood the wily wizard, and spoke at once: "You are a coward. You cannot deceive me." Saying this, the Fire King made a sign to the unwary Hako to attack him. Kokai now turned upon Shikuyu furiously, but he was tired and unable to fight well, and he soon received a wound in his shoulder. He now broke from the fray and tried to escape in earnest. While the fight between their leaders had been going on, the two armies had stood waiting for the issue. Shikuyu now turned and bade Jokwa's soldiers charge the enemy's forces. This they did, and routed them with great slaughter, and the wizard barely escaped with his life. It was in vain that Kokai called upon the Water Devil to help him, for Shikuyu knew the counter charm, for his wound began to trouble him, and frenzied with disappointment and fear, he dashed his head against the rocks of Mount Shu and died on the spot. There was an end of the wicked Kokai, but not of trouble in the Empress Jokwa's kingdom, as you shall see. The force with which the wizard fell against the rocks was so great that the mountain burst, and fire rushed out from the earth, and one of the pillars upholding the heavens was broken, so that one corner of the sky dropped till it touched the earth. Shikuyu, the Fire King, took up the body of the wizard and carried it to the Empress Jokwa, who rejoiced greatly that her enemy was vanquished and her generals victorious. She showered all manner of gifts and honors upon Shikuyu. But all this time the fire was bursting from the mountain broken by the fall of Kokai. Whole villages were destroyed, rice fields burnt up, riverbeds filled with the burning lava, and the homeless people were in great distress. So the Empress left the capital as soon as she had rewarded the victor Shikuyu, and journeyed with all speed to the scene of disaster. She found that both heaven and earth had sustained damage, and the place was so dark that she had to light her lamp to find out the extent of the havoc that had been wrought. Having ascertained this, she set to work at repairs. To this end she ordered her subjects to collect stones of 5 colors: blue, yellow, red, white, and black. When she had obtained these, she boiled them with a kind of porcelain in a large cauldron, and the mixture became a beautiful paste, and with this she knew she could mend the sky. Now all was ready. Summoning the clouds that were sailing ever so high above her head, she mounted them and rode heavenwards, carrying in her hands the vase containing the paste made from the stones of 5 colors. She soon reached the corner of the sky that was broken, and applied the paste and mended it. Having done this, she turned her attention to the broken pillar, and with the legs of a very large tortoise she mended it. When this was finished, she mounted the clouds and descended to the earth, hoping to find that all was now right, but to her dismay she found that it was still quite dark. Neither the sun shone by day nor the moon by night. Greatly perplexed, she at last called a meeting of all the wise men of the kingdom, and asked their advice as to what she should do in this dilemma. 2 of the wisest said:
"The roads of heaven have been damaged by the late accident, and the sun and moon have been obliged to stay at home. Neither the sun could make his daily journey, nor the moon her nightly one, because of the bad roads. The sun and moon do not yet know that your Majesty has mended all that was damaged, so we will go and inform them that since you have repaired them, the roads are safe."
The Empress approved of what the wise men suggested, and ordered them to set out on their mission. But this was not easy, for the palace of the Sun and Moon was many, many hundreds of thousands of miles distant into the east. If they traveled on foot, they might never reach the place; they would die of old age on the road. But Jokwa had recourse to magic. She gave her two ambassadors wonderful chariots which could whirl through the air by magic power 1,000 miles per minute. They set out in good spirits, riding above the clouds, and after many days they reached the country where the Sun and the Moon were living happily together. The two ambassadors were granted an interview with their Majesties of Light, and asked them why they had for so many days secluded themselves from the universe. Did they not know that by doing so they plunged the world and all its people into uttermost darkness both day and night? Replied the Sun and the Moon: "Surely you know that Mount Shu has suddenly burst forth with fire, and the roads of heaven have been greatly damaged. I, the Sun, found it impossible to make my daily journey along such rough roads, and certainly the Moon could not issue forth at night, so we both retired into private life for a time." Then the two wise men bowed themselves to the ground and said: "Our Empress Jokwa has already repaired the roads with the wonderful stones of 5 colors, so we beg to assure your Majesties that the roads are just as they were before the eruption took place." But the Sun and the Moon still hesitated, saying that they had heard that one of the pillars of heaven had been broken as well, and they feared that, even if the roads had been remade, it would still be dangerous for them to sally forth on their usual journeys. "You need have no anxiety about the broken pillar," said the two ambassadors. "Our Empress restored it with the legs of a great tortoise, and it is as firm as it ever was." Then the Sun and Moon appeared satisfied, and they both set out to try the roads. They found that what the Empress's deputies had told them was correct. After the examination of the heavenly roads, the Sun and Moon again gave light to the earth. All the people rejoiced greatly, and peace and prosperity were secured in China for a long time under the reign of the wise Empress Jokwa. End of chapter 22. The Stones of 5 Colors and the Empress Jokwa. Recording by Scott Robbins. End of Japanese Fairy Tales by Yei Theodora OZAKI.
Has my volume not worked this whole time? I don't know why it keeps changing that. Anyway, I blather on and you guys don't hear me say a thing. Anyway. It's good stories anyway. You know what was going on for the most part. I was trying to fix my colors at the beginning. And, kind of annoyed about that, but what a pain in the arse that was to find out. Anyway, this is a pin cushion. I decided to match, kind of match my stuff. The colors match anyway. The leaves are the same sort as the petals are the same sort as the leaves in this one. It's just because the way this one joins, I didn't want to bother doing it that way. I didn't want the loops. I wanted this to be free. So I just kind of did the same way as I did the leaves. And what I'll do here is after I stuff it, I will put a little row of probably 3 leaves back here. And then it'll sit nicely. And I can stab it. It'll give me somewhere nice and cute to put my flowers. So anyway, thanks for coming by. Hope you have an absolutely wonderful night. Sorry about the volume or the audio problems I didn't realize we had because no one came by to visit me while I was live. I'll have to bug my friends. I know that there was a storm and there's power issues going on where my friends all live because of the heat. So, yeah, I'm not too worried about it. But anyway, so love you guys. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll talk to you later. Bye. Where is it?